What strategies do you recommend to create the ideal corporate culture?
Be aspirational with your culture, know what it means, and don't be perfectionistic. So when companies talk to me about their culture, they often talk to me about it in this perfectionistic point of view. Like, now that we've put these words on a piece of paper, that's what we are. When in reality, it's like, that's like kind of saying like, I'm going to go from not running marathons to saying, I'm going to run a marathon the very next day. If you're trying to change your culture, especially if you're like trying to change it from maybe having some challenges, you can't just will it into existence the very next day and imagine it to be perfect. That's perfectionism. And I'll just tell you that like doing that is more often than not how I see people try and do this thing. It's like, we are this. Are you? Or are 10 people in a room saying that they want to be that? And maybe 3 of those 10 people deeply disagree, but aren't saying it because the rest of the people are saying it. Culture is a real interesting thing. I really believe companies should focus on their culture, but they should be totally aspirational for it and factor in that human beings are going to human being. So that means like we actually know what that means. So first of all, from the aspirational space, we should be aspiring towards great things. So your culture should be like, we aspire to be like this, and we know exactly what the behaviors are that support this culture. And then we understand what the skills are that are associated with that. So for example, if we're going to say we aspire to be a culture where everyone has a voice. That's all. That's amazing. I love that. That's fantastic. All right. So what's a behavior around that? Well, a behavior around that is that people are constantly in the facilitator mindset. And the facilitator mindset would be, not only are they comfortable speaking, but they're also very, very comfortable with encouraging other people to speak, inviting people to speak. So what's a skill around that? Well, a skill around that is it would be asking really effective questions. It would be having really strong physical and verbal presence, but mostly it's about empathy, being able to read the room, seeing who's silent, kind of having an understanding of why they're silent, and then being able to create the right kind of situation where you can give an opening for them to speak, which they may or may not take up, and that then we don't pester them afterwards. So empathy is an actual skill. People don't think it's a skill, but it's a total skill. So think of that from like a cultural perspective. It's like we aspire to be a culture where everyone has a voice. It is awesome. I love that idea, but it has a lot of elements that you really need to understand what you're shooting for. So again, what are the behaviors involved? And then what are the skills associated? So that's like understand what you're shooting for and make sure you've got like hire the right kind of people. You train those people, like you have like all the things that would support that ongoing. But the other piece of it is when I say aspirational, it's you got to let people be people. So if you aspire towards something, you've got to understand that like there's going to be times where people aren't acting like that. And it could be one person, it could be 10 people, it could be like, we're going through a difficult time financially, or there's a lot of stress and people aren't acting up to the culture. So if you're not being perfectionistic, you're assuming that people are going to go off of that aspirational space. So an easy way to start is say, we aspire to be this at least 70% of the time on average. And then in that 30% when we're not like that, we have the awareness and skills to get back to that. We can have the conversations. We can look at ourselves in the mirror and kind of hold ourselves accountable. 70% might sound like, oh, that sucks. Like only 70% of the time. Frankly, like if you're being perfectionistic about something, I got to tell you that number is going to be a lot lower. So if you keep it at 70% and get successful at that, so you know what the behaviors are and the skills, you focus on the training about it, that 70% over time becomes like 72%. It becomes 80%. It becomes 87%. Are you ever going to get to 100%? No, because human beings are human beings and they're going to go through difficult times and wild things are going to happen. But you can get more effective and better at being consistent with living an aspirational culture at a higher percentage if you focus on gradual growth. And that also lets people norm to the culture and have it be like a real organic thing rather than this, we are this perspective.